Welcome back to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos Podcast, the show where we talk about anything and everything relating to what it means to be a survivalist and a prepared individual in today's society. I'm your host, Chris Bartigone, ZP002. Today, we have a special guest, Michelle Owens.
Yes. Hello.
From Georgia, ZERT, Georgia, in the house. Michelle,
That's
you are
right.
a POC for the state of Georgia and
Yes.
a little bit of a survivalist yourself, right?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Well, welcome to the show, Michelle. Thanks for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be on.
Awesome. When we do these shows every week, it's always a kind of a challenge to come up with the topic of the week. And as you're aware, we do this show weekly, and usually I have between my two co-hosts, Jamie Franks, who is one of our instructors out in California, and Paul Taylor, who's one of the instructors in Pennsylvania. It's always fun coming up with a topic of conversation. And a lot of times I sit there and I ask those guys, I'm like, all right, well, what do you guys want to talk about? Is there anything that you want? And sometimes they've got great ideas, and sometimes they're like, I don't know, you figure it out. You're the boss. And I'm just like, yeah, you pick. And it's like, okay, great. And then, when I put this out to all of the POCs for the states within Georgia, obviously there was a couple of people that were like, yeah, I'd love to be on. And I think you and I were talking about, you didn't even actually respond to that, but you had shared one of your pages with me, and I was like, oh, okay. And that's when we kind of started talking back and forth. But we're going to get into kind of how you got involved in ZERT, but I want you to give our listeners here a little bit about what you are, who you are, where you kind of sit in your survival plan.
Yeah.
So take it away,
awesome.
Michelle. Give us a little bit of give us a little intro on who Michelle is.
You mean I actually get to talk about myself? I love it.
Of course, you do.
So Michelle Owens, so been a prepper survivalist for probably closer to 20 years or so. Live here in Savannah, Georgia, and have been training in various disciplines, from situational awareness to firearms safety to self-defense, in various different disciplines, but also constantly looking at bushcraft and learning how to live off the land and care for my family, because that's primary to me. And then also work in the firearms industry, so that's been pretty awesome for me. I'm an instructor, I am a competitor, I am all the things that have to do with the pew-pews.
Awesome. So yeah, that's great. And it's funny because we share a mutual buddy, mutual friend, and who's also a ZERT member, and a guy that I worked with and I've known for a few years when I worked for the same company that you're working for now, in a different iteration. But I believe I had sent him a mug, a ZERT mug, and you were like, wait, what's that? And like, you kind of saw it, and then you asked him about it, and he was able to tell you a little bit about it, and it kind of went from there. And obviously when you and I started to talk, I was very interested and very intrigued. And what I love about this platform, this show, and then opening it up to ZERT members, is to hear kind of about their journey into this. So you've been doing this kind of survivalist preparedness for 20 years, and we joke, or it's been a running joke, or I guess maybe a talking point since I started this show. One of the first few episodes, I remember growing up as a kid, like, and going on vacation with my parents, like I would always have to bring rope. Like I always felt like rope was going to be the need for the survival situation. And, who knows where that came from, but I always would have to like bring certain things when going on vacation with my parents when I was younger. And it wasn't until later in life, much later in life, where I started to really look at it from a different point of view. And so obviously it sounds like did you grow up in that kind of situation, or?
No, not at all. So my family, I grew up in Boulder, Colorado. So mountains were always part of my life, hiking and being outdoors. So you always wanted to be prepared in some form or fashion, growing up out there. But my family is Middle Eastern. They're very much homebodies, great family, very cultural.
Yep.
Never really taught me much about survival. My dad was in the army, but that was Vietnam, and it's something he really doesn't talk much about.
Right.
But just growing up in general, I kind of had to fend for myself a lot because growing up in Colorado, it's a very beautiful place, and
Yeah.
um, Boulder is very wealthy, and there's
Yeah.
not much threats there. But at the same time, also I had to figure out life for myself, being of color. So
Sure. Sure.
it was
Now,
a little bit
yeah.
difficult, but
Yeah,
so
and you look at Colorado now versus probably, X amount of years ago, and Colorado is a different place now.
gosh,
Um,
100%, 100%.
and same thing here, right? I live in the Northeast up in Connecticut for now, and there is you I guess we get seasons up here. Y'all don't really
Mhm.
have that down there.
Yeah.
You guys are all. You grew up in Colorado. How much time did you spend out there?
So I was there for 18 years.
Okay, so you got to
Yeah.
experience the winter, the snow, the
Yes.
whole situation
Yes.
there, and
Yeah.
it's funny because I talked to Daniel, and I'm like, yeah, you're not gonna make it in the apocalypse, like unless you can go live in the tropical area, like you're screwed, and
Especially
it's
him.
right, and it's funny
I hope
because
he's listening.
yeah, I talked to friends of mine that live in Florida. So I spent a little bit of time in South Florida, and I've got friends that
Mhm.
were from up here in Connecticut, Bridgeport, Connecticut during
Mhm.
the 80s and 90s when it was just, like they had a boxing ring set up in their backyard and they would just box as kids. Tough
Yep.
dudes, and my buddy Ray talks about his son. He was like, "Yeah, my son's a pussy." Like they grew up in South Florida, and when it
Mhm.
gets to 70, when it gets to 65 degrees, they're freezing and they don't know what to do, and
Right.
they wouldn't know how to survive in an environment like the Northeast. And their
Right.
whole thing is, well, I just won't live there, and it's just like, okay, I get that, but
Mhm.
you know, I get it, but if the world changes, if stuff goes sideways, and we don't, no,
Yeah.
we're no longer, you've got to be prepared for that. I'm glad that I live in the
100%.
Northeast and know how
Right.
to survive and thrive in temperatures sub 20 degrees.
Right.
My
Yeah.
biggest, like one of the things on my bucket list is to do a winter camp. I want to do a full on winter camp
Yes.
in 5-10 degrees, like just
Yes.
out in the deep snow.
Yeah.
And
That
the
sounds
outdoor,
epic.
yeah, I don't know if you watch the Outdoor Boys on YouTube, but
Sometimes, yeah.
uh that dude he's a savage.
Mhm.
He goes out there and does some wild stuff. So, all right. So you've got a little bit of winter experience and understand,
Yes.
how to kind of manage through that. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it's funny. We just watched, Amy and I just watched Alone Australia,
Oh, okay. Yep.
and you're familiar with the Alone series,
Mhm.
right? Great show.
Mhm.
It just starts testing your survival knowledge and kind of like, ooh, and I picked up some awesome little things on there that I did not. I was like, okay, that's interesting. I didn't realize you could pull some of that stuff, or you could do
Mhm.
some of that stuff. But the one in Australia, they were on Tasmania Island, or the island of
Mhm.
Tasmania there,
Mhm.
and it was more of a rainforest, more of a tropical type setting,
Ooh.
and they weren't able to utilize the environment or as a way of
Ooh.
preserving food. Um,
Oh,
they didn't get the temperatures that
yeah.
dropped to where, you
Yep.
basically had a refrigerator outside
Mhm.
of your shelter. And I
Mhm.
think that can hurt people. There's some of that basic knowledge of how to
Yep.
store food and whatnot. But
Yep.
so 20 years you've been doing this.
Mhm.
How did you start? Give me a little bit of how you
So
got down
met
the
my
journey.
husband
Mhm.
over 20 years ago. He was in the Navy, so
Okay.
he grew up in Georgia, not in Georgia, I'm sorry, in Alabama.
Okay.
But, was always an outdoorsy boy, was a Navy boy, but really
Yep.
just enjoyed being outdoors and living off the land and figuring things out like that. He went through a few of the military trainings
Okay.
that would aid in developing a
Sure.
young sailor,
Yep.
or soldiers because they go through the same exact training.
Right. Right.
But so he went through a lot of those and kind of started teaching me about them. And through that, like living in California, we'd go out to the desert a lot and just enjoy, spending time out there and just like, what can you eat off the land at that point? It's
Right.
like, oh, this is kind of interesting. Like we found this plant that tasted like broccoli. So we're like, that's our broccoli plant. And we started to learn a little bit more about like what was our environment. And then
Right.
again, in Colorado, like a lot of that sparked from growing up out there. What do you do with rattlesnakes? Like, how do you interact with, the environment? What are some of the edible plants that are around you? And then also, like you said, in the snow, what are the things that you need in your vehicle in order to survive if you get stuck in the
Huge.
snow?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
So, or if you're out on a hike, because, Colorado weather is unpredictable. You could be in the middle of a snowstorm or rainstorm or ice storm within
Yeah.
seconds. And
Yep.
5 minutes earlier, it was bright and sunny. So just always being prepared, just kind of pulled me into starting to like identify my surroundings first and foremost. So that goes back to like situational awareness, right?
Yeah.
So understanding what my situation is and then how can I survive this situation without my comforts. So
Yeah.
I, of course, love my comforts,
Of
but
course. Of course. Right.
I had to start learning like what do I need to do if I have to do this on my own,
Yeah.
and if I have to figure out a way to get from point A to point B and everything is down, how am I going to do that? So that's kind of where it started. And then since
Yeah.
then it's developed and
Yeah.
grown and turned into a lot of other crazy things. So,
Yeah. And you bring up a good point right there. And, I think that's what a lot of people out there are under the misconception of, right? That, oh, okay, the world's going to end tomorrow and I'm just going to grab my cell phone and I'm going to
mhm,
Google directions. No, like, sure, there are going to be levels of chaos
right.
if it goes that way, right? I mean, if we engage in World War III, this looming World War III thing here, or we enter into some kind of post-apocalyptic or civil war, there's going to be levels of it, but
Mhm,
everybody is under the assumption that they're going to just pick up where they kind of left off and just, okay, let me Google what's happening in the world today. No, like the
yeah.
comms go down, the grid goes
Yeah.
down, those things are
Mhm,
real. And what we've talked about kind of been a topic, a string of topics on this show since the beginning is the first step to all of this survival is having a plan, but not just a plan, because your plan goes sideways and you've got to come up with something else. You've got to have a
exactly.
plan, a contingency plan, a backup plan to that. Like you've got
Mhm,
to have multiple layers, and
yeah.
we've talked about go bags and
Mhm,
get home bags, go bags, and then the inch bag, which is the I'm never
mhm,
coming home bag. And
mhm,
each one of those, I mean, you may start with a basis or a foundation, but you're going to need to ramp that up or down based off of
mhm.
what is happening outdoors. One of the things
Correct.
that, like, okay, I've got a plan to get to this next spot, and that's where I'm going to pick up more people, and then we're going to go to and grab my family. Well, that's great, but if my plan requires me to go out to my vehicle and we've been hit by an EMP, plan's screwed.
Yeah, exactly.
Throw it out. Now
Yep.
we've got as ZERT members and partners that we have out there. So like we've partnered with Faraday Defense. So
Yep.
Faraday
Cool.
Defense offers a bunch of different things for EMP protection, and we had them on
Mhm.
the show. And I don't know, I mean, I'm not sure how well you're tracking on EMPs and whatnot, but
Oh,
you
yeah.
know that that happens over a major city like Atlanta. Savannah doesn't
Mhm.
have much time. Like you don't have
No.
time. If
Yeah.
you don't have measures in place leading up to
Right.
that, you're
Right.
screwed. You know, I'm 90 miles from 90 minutes from New York City. You know,
Oh gosh, yeah.
I'm 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 entirely too close to the city, and obviously I don't love that. But outside of stuff like that, you've got those natural disaster, and that's kind of how ZERT was birthed. Well, it wasn't. That's how it evolved. I shouldn't say how it was
Yeah,
birthed. It was
that's true.
birthed one way, and then it evolved based on being prepared for any man-made or natural disaster that we have seen and may see
I
in our
see.
lifetime. Living in South Florida, we always had to be prepared for hurricanes during hurricane
Yeah,
season.
yeah.
Now, for a South Floridian, that just means how much booze you get at the liquor store, because that's it. They throw hurricane parties during hurricane. Exactly.
Yeah.
I failed today. I didn't come up to do this podcast with a bourbon, but you're
Yeah.
drinking for us. So
I got you. I got you covered.
But hurricane season is a thing, and people kind of prepare for it, and they give you a lot of notice before a hurricane comes, right? They're like, oh, okay, it's here, it's expected to hit landfall.
Yeah.
You look at those folks out in Tornado Alley in the Midwest there, like there's no warning. You go to sleep at night at 11 o'clock and you wake up, with your house destroyed because a hurricane or a tornado ripped through.
Tornado hits you. Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah.
You guys experience some winter weather this past winter, right? Where I think you guys were shut down for, I know that people were stranded. This goes back a couple of years. There was a big giant pileup on the highway, and
oh man,
and people were stranded in their vehicles, and there were some people that died because they were not prepared for that.
That actually was in Atlanta. So I was living in North Georgia at the time when that big apocalypse craziness occurred, and it took me it's only 20 minutes to get from my office to my house. It took me over 2.5 hours. I ran out of gas and had to foot it back. I mean, to that point, because you were solid ice in areas, so you had to detour off of areas. And luckily I was close enough that I was able to make it. But again, I mean, that's just one of those things, like, you're not normally thinking about it. I had a buddy with me because he couldn't get home. So I was like, come with me. I have an all-wheel drive car. We'll be able to get somewhere at least, and closer, because he lived further out. And we got back to the house, and I mean, I lived on a very, very steep hill, so I parked it, like, my car ran out of gas right at the bottom, and I was like, let's just puff it all the way up. We're good.
And one of the other kind of repeating things that we discuss here is you're never going to be prepared for everything. I mean, you just can't do it. I don't have 2 years worth of food stored, and I'm not going to. I remember during COVID, right? And that's when I decided to kind of reach out to Aaron, the original founder of ZERT, and we talked about me taking over ZERT and buying it. And it was during COVID. And I remember sitting with my buddy, 2 of my buddies, and they were both working for Sports South. And I was like, and they started asking about ZERT members, and I was like, yeah, they're still around. And I started to think about it, and I was like, well, the bottom line is, if you're prepared for a zombie apocalypse or an apocalypse, you were prepared for COVID. And that was a really real thing. And what I meant by that is, remember in the beginning of COVID, when everyone thought that you were just going to need 4 million rolls of toilet paper, and the stores were out of toilet paper.
Yes.
Right. And then you were going to need hand sanitizer. So you couldn't make enough, and you couldn't have enough. And then the other thing that went immediately was all of the ammunition. And that was a real telling. That was a real telling situation for a lot of us. Whether we were working in the firearms industry, in the ammo space, or a prepared individual. But I didn't freak out about any of it, because
you had it ready.
I shopped at Costco for toilet paper, and I had enough toilet paper to last me for an entire year.
Right.
I had hand sanitizer. I don't know why, but I had it, and I didn't use it very often. So there was enough of it, but I also didn't really need it. the biggest part about that was I didn't run out and buy ammunition because I had ammunition. Now,
Yeah.
when you talk to a prepared individual, a survivalist, and it comes to ammunition, this is another topic that we talk about all the time. And Jamie and I talk about it. We talk about it. Like, okay, what's your loadout for the apocalypse? What does that look like? What are you taking? You know, and with COVID, like I always said, I have enough ammo to get more. I've got enough. Right. Like I mean, I've had to put 10,000 rounds in the back of my pickup truck. It's not a fun time.
Yeah.
And I'm not doing it. 10,000 rounds of 9mm. And I'm not doing it again.
Yeah, no.
I'm not taking that.
No.
You know, I'm going to take enough to cover myself and then to get more should I need it.
And that's exactly what it is. Like,
Right.
I mean, that's my loadout is what can I carry? And I've also trained myself in various disciplines again to carry more.
Right.
You know, so training is very important. Where can I store more, you know, but I have enough to get to where I need to get to. And if I need to get more, I will be able to get more on my way.
Right.
And that's also like a big thing, like you mentioned, you know, also carrying calibers that are relatable. Like popular calibers, you're talking your 223, 5.56, 9mm.
Right.
You don't need to be carrying a 45 because chances about coming near somebody who has a 45 are slimmer. You know, I mean, and it's a realization that you have to come across is like if you're going to have to foot it from point A to point B, and you may need to get some more ammunition, you might need to find a way to do that, and chances are it's going to have to be something that's more typical.
Exactly. And that's, you know, quite honestly, it's one of the reasons why I ended up buying a Glock 19. It's just if I run out of magazines or we need magazines, we know where that we can get more magazines.
Yeah. That's very true.
You know, I'm also not one of those guys that I've got a get home bag. And then I've got a level up to that get home bag. And then in my vehicle, I've got a larger level up to that get home bag, I would say, because it's got more medical equipment in it. So my get home bag is just additional magazines, an OWB holster, and to kind of level up what I have. And one of the things that I've always said on this show before the show is what I have on me gets me to my vehicle. What I have in my vehicle gets me home, and what I have at home allows me to shelter in place or bug out, depending on what that situation is. So, you know, like one of the things that Jamie says all the time is that the rifle is only, or the only thing the pistol is good for is to fight to your rifle. And I agree to a sense because sure, what I have on me is a pistol. And I need to get to my rifle, which is not in that next step. It's a final step. So I better be good with that to be able to continue the fight to go on. You know, we live in a day and age where we did a show about the truck guns and you know, growing up having a rifle rack in the back of our truck, and that's what you had, but you can't do that these days. And I'm not going to roll around with a rifle in my vehicle, but you know, I understand that
now.
Yeah, I mean, you know, but I understand what my loadout looks like, and I understand that in that survival or apocalypse situation, I want to be covert as long as I possibly can. So understanding, you know, that as part of your survival plan is important. You know, like if you think you're going to go slap on your plate carrier with your ballistic helmet and your nods and put on camo and walk down the street, like, cool, I know where I can go get more ammo when I need it.
Exactly.
Like I know,
exactly.
Right? You know,
and that just goes back into that gray man, you know, gray man situation. It's like you need to act a way that you're not attracting attention from other people. You look like you don't look like a threat, so nobody's going to mess with you. And any situation that you're in, you need to focus on you and getting to your next destination. So having all that extra, having anything that's weighing you down and or calling you out is going to be a potential threat.
One of my biggest gripes when it comes to Amy is I'm like, she's got gas in her car, but never enough gas, right? Like I drive a Ram, and I never let my gas tank go lower than a quarter of a tank. And I know that a quarter of a tank will get me 100 miles. So I know if the shit goes off tomorrow and if I can get my vehicle out, I know that I've got up to 100 miles before I need to go. So, and that was one of the things that we talked about in a past show with Jamie is like, okay, well, sure, you're a prepared individual. Does that mean every day you come home with your vehicle, you back it in, and you've got a full tank of gas ready to go? Because I don't always come home with a full tank of gas, but that's just one of those things. I mean,
it's just,
it's something you don't think about.
That hits home. So yesterday I was driving home, and I live about 40 miles away from my office. And I'm out in the country. So I drive a diesel car. And it's a VW, so it's a car. I wish I had a truck still. But it gets really good gas or diesel mileage.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm driving home, and I was like, look down at my gauge. I'm like, man, I probably need some fuel because I'm under a half a tank, and my thing is half a tank. So I get home, tell my husband, I'm like, hey, by the way, if you're going to the gym later, can you just fill it up so that just in case, I'm heading back to the office, whatever. If I get stuck in traffic, I could sit there and just be uncomfortable, and I hate that feeling.
Right.
So he ends up taking my vehicle later that evening, and because my headlights are really shitty, he ends up hitting a deer.
Oh no.
The car's down now.
Oh God.
I should have just done it tomorrow.
Yeah. Oh man, that's horrible. But I mean, you could process the deer and end up with venison jerky. I'll find the silver lining somewhere, right? Yeah.
There's always one.
So then what, okay. So, now you start picking this stuff up, you start doing this stuff, and where would you say your proficiency is with it? I mean, you've talked about bushcraft, right? So are you out there? Are you practicing that stuff? Like, what are you really focusing on? I mean, the firearm stuff, we can talk firearms all day long.
Oh yeah.
But there's a lot of other cool stuff when it comes to being a prepared individual.
Right. And trust me, firearms is like my life, and I love it. But yes, I can definitely talk on other things too. So, I'm blessed to have some property. So like, thankfully we were able to purchase the property when we moved down here. And since moving down here, learning some skills to live off the land, because obviously we went from North Georgia, which is different terrain and different culture, different environment in general, to down here. So I was like, we need to start learning, like, what can we use down here to survive?
Right.
So we started practicing, building fires, building shelters, figuring out what type of foliage to use for different aspects, building lean-tos if we need to, sources of water, identifying sources of proper water to use, how to filter water without using devices, just going down the rabbit hole of like, okay, what are the primary things that you need is food, shelter, water. Let's now move all the way down that. And how can you do that without the amenities around you, without your house or your, phone or anything else? So, practice that when I can.
Yeah. Okay. And you get to do that all on your property, which is huge, and that's that. So we talk about firearms training all the time, right? Like, go out, get training, and you run into hurdles with that based off of how, the access to a range or whatnot.
Right.
But some of the bushcraft stuff you can literally do in your house, in your backyard, wherever,
anything.
The other day I was walking the dog. I was walking Stella, and there was like a piece of just dead-ish wood. And I grabbed that real quick. I was like, you know what? One of the things, I said her name, and she appeared. There she is, slapping her ears around.
Hi, Stella.
She's the star. But obviously, I enjoy using a ferro rod to make a fire, right? And it's really easy when you go out and you get like Blackbeard Tacticals,
Oh yeah.
fire plugs or
Yeah.
fast fire sticks. I mean, they make a great, like a great fire starter.
Yes, they do.
One of the other ones that we actually carried on the ZERT site, Pyro Putty.
Oh yeah.
But again, yeah, I mean, it's all good stuff and it's all great stuff to have. And when I go car camping, I bring it and I use it. And even when I'm making a fire here in the fireplace, I'll still use it, even though I could just use other stuff. But one of the things that we've always referred to and talked about is skill versus gear, right? Like, sure, if you're only a good shooter because you've used a $4,000, Terran special and you can't hit the broadside of a barn without a race gun, then you suck. Same thing with making fire. Like, sure, if I have a lighter and I can use a lighter, great. But if I don't, what am I going to use? Now, a ferro rod is still a piece of equipment, and being able to make fire without that, I think, is huge. Now,
yes,
I'm sure you've practiced some of that stuff.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, I've used many different tools to try to light fires. I will not say that I'm the most proficient at a lot of them.
Yeah.
I try.
Yeah.
And I have an 11-year-old son as well, and he's been learning how to make fires and stuff. But also, like, it's identifying what tools do you have around you that can be useful. So, like, there are companies out there that even have like ferro rod or fire starter necklaces and bracelets that you can wear, things that you can keep on your body that are turn into your part of your life. Obviously the stick method is a little bit more difficult, but people think, oh, it's super easy. No, it's not.
No, it's not. Are you talking a bow and string? Yeah.
Yes, bow and string. And just, I mean, again, building one of those with what you have around you, if you're in an environment that doesn't have like the feasibility to do it, it's difficult. So it's really just like understanding. And that's, again, I kind of equate, my survival life with my situational awareness, because you need to know where you're at all times. And we all travel. I mean, we're in a very nice position for us to be able to travel. So, when I'm in Vegas, I saw you in Vegas last, I need to know what is there in Vegas that can, in Nevada, that I can use to help me grow and be able to get to my house if shit hit the fan.
For sure.
So any type of situation like that, it just gets you to a point where it's like, okay, I need to know what do I have around me that I can use? And in a lot of those situations, if an EMP hits or something of that nature, vehicles are going to be down. So, you may not be next to your vehicle, but there are things, or you may be next to your vehicle, it may not move, but there's many items within your vehicle that you can utilize to start fires, to create shelter, to collect water, to do, all the things you need. So it's, again, looking at what's around you and using it.
Yeah. And it's funny you mention that because, like I said, I've got in the bag, one of the bags in the car, I mean, I do have a life straw in there. And in the larger bag, I've got the Catadine, the bladder, like, for filter. So it's important. One of the things you mentioned, you said food, shelter, and water, what I find very interesting, especially in that show alone, is the people that go right for the shelter, right? So, like, it's the threes, the survival threes, right? 3 minutes without air, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, 3 weeks without with 3 weeks without food. Food is literally the last thing that you should be looking for. Now, I feel like, even though that's the norm, right? That's the standard. There is a way, like, food is comfort. And this is something that Jamie talks about all the time. Like, if you're, if this situation happens and you have a young child, like, the food could be used to kind of calm them down or comfort or whatnot. And I get that. And you also do need food. Like, if you're going to start building a monster shelter, you've got to have something to feed the tank, so it's important to kind of have the right balance when it comes to that. Obviously, 3 minutes without air, that's going to be situational dependent, right? Like
You're right.
I don't have, like, Mira Safety is one of our preferred vendors, and I don't carry, I mean, I've got one of their masks and their filters, but I don't
Right.
carry that in my vehicle.
Yeah, no,
You know?
good point. Because I
Yeah,
mean, honestly, it's something that should be done, but not
right.
something that I think about right away,
Right. It's definitely
So,
not, and that's the
mhm.
and what did you see the movie Homestead?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so that opening scene was very, it was kind of very telling right off the bat. Like they
right,
got hit with that situation, and having breathable air was their
right,
first problem,
right.
but obviously everyone grabbed a go bag and they all started, and uh the big or the big kind of stick in the eye with that one was their electric vehicle that they went rolling out of California on, and it was all good until
Mhm,
they didn't have a plug to plug it in and they had to steal a car. But
mhm.
there's something to
That
be
was funny
said.
to me.
Yeah, there was something to be said about that. But um the one thing that I think I noticed, I think this happened when they got into that vehicle, and it is the one thing about the Teslas that has always been interesting to me is they have that biohazard mode where
Mm,
basically it seals all of the vents from the outside,
mm.
and it just
Circulates.
recirculates
Yeah.
the air inside. And
Mhm.
um that was, I did notice that they made a point of that during the movie. But anyway, um you know, back to the bushcraft stuff,
Mhm,
making so anyway, I grabbed this little stick and I came inside. I was like, all right, let me see if I can create a fire starter from this. And I just scraped it and scraped it and scraped it and got a little pile of it and brought it over to the fireplace, and I hit it with the ferro rod, and sure enough,
mhm.
we got
Yeah,
the fire that we were looking for, that we could have
good.
easily added on to and used that.
Yeah.
um my goal this year when I go car camping is to
Mhm.
take one thing away each time.
That's a good idea.
Like I
Yeah.
want to take away the fire starter for my first
Mhm.
camping trip, and I want to use something natural to create that
Yeah,
fire.
yeah.
So that's my promise to myself, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take one
That's a
thing
great
away.
idea.
Yeah.
But like what you were just saying, like also, you using those skills, like, because skills get lost. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the truth is we lose a lot of our skills if we're not utilizing them. And, when you learn something one time, that's great, but you need to constantly develop that skill or make sure that you hone that skill.
Yeah.
But like, like you said, you were starting fires in your home, like
Right.
within the proper way to help it.
Right.
But like
Correctly.
also building
Yes.
shelters, like making it fun if you have kids, like I said, I have a kid, so I make
Right.
it fun for him. Let's figure out a way to build a shelter.
Yeah. That's
Let's
awesome.
find a way to collect water. It's not raining. What can we do? What are
Yeah.
some fun things we could do? So yeah.
So you just brought up shelter building. That is one
Mhm.
thing that I would definitely love to really dive into. You've got to do, I mean, you can't go to a campground and pull that off. You definitely have to have some kind of spot where you can go in and try that. And
You
having,
could.
obviously, well, yeah, I mean, I guess you could
Yes, you
go
could.
roll into a campground and just start taking trees down and build a
Yeah.
little lean-to for the night, and
It,
watch all the
it's
people
funny.
around you going, what the hell's going
What
on
the
there?
hell?
Yeah.
It'd be
um
funny.
it would be. I wouldn't mind trying it.
Mhm.
What has been your preferred shelter to build?
Yeah, so I mean, it's honestly just using brush and trees around me.
Okay.
Luckily, I've lived in the South where there's a lot of
Right.
trees. We
Yeah.
have that benefit, but also like digging in. So I actually took my son to one of the Georgia Bushcraft events a few years ago. Not even a few years ago, it was last year. And one of the courses was teaching you had a team of 4, and all you had was a pocket knife, a lighter that was drenched in water, like it was soaked in water,
Okay.
and some string. So you had to figure out, and so going back to your string topic. You have to have string with you.
Yeah,
But we were able to build a lean-to basically between some trees. We pulled down some smaller sapling trees and we're able to create a lean-to and a shelter that all of us could fit in. And that was the criteria. You had to be able to fit in it too.
Okay.
So then we were able to dig out some of the land underneath it. So first and foremost, when I'm looking at any terrain and trying to build shelter, I'm looking at the terrain. What can I use around me? Is there rocks around? Are there big trees, small trees? Is there anything that I can use that's natural enough that I don't have to do a lot of extra work? Because again, if I'm trying to survive, I don't want to, start hacking at a tree and like wearing myself out with a little pocket knife.
Right.
So I'm looking at those aspects and then I take from there, what can I build outside of that? Now, also looking at the situation, am I in a position where I need to be hidden or
Yep.
can I be open? Does
Yep.
my fire need to be hidden or can it be out in the open? So like those are the type of like I think through those scenarios first before starting to build a shelter that would make sense in a situation. So
yeah, that makes sense. Now when you say string, or was it paracord or was it
it was like string. It was like
just regular straight up string.
Yeah, I can't even remember what it's called. Like that stuff that kind of hurts when you touch it. I can't remember what it's called. But yeah, I was like, oh, like this isn't even strong.
Yeah, like twine or something like that.
Yeah, like twine. That's exactly what it was. It was twine.
Yeah, I mean, we've done a show about ropes. We've done a show about knots. The different types of rope, and obviously paracord is. I've got paracord in the larger bag, the one that has more medical stuff. But obviously, that I have a dog, right? So one of the important things is having in your kit, whatever you're doing, whether you're building a shelter or whatnot, you've got to think like, okay, do you have animals? Do you have kids? Like, how much are you going to need? The shelter, your shelter is a little bit different in Georgia because you don't have to worry about warmth as much as building a shelter up here in February or March when the temperatures could drop to 20 degrees at night. I mean, I've done, like I said, I've done car camping, and that's we just load up the vehicle and we go. But I mean, I remember going one year in April and we saw 40, I think it was 45 or 46 degrees overnight. Now, that's not horribly cold. Especially if you've got some of the right equipment. The only equipment I need in that situation is a 55-pound pit bull and a wool blanket, because she is a nuclear heater. I have stopped bringing a sleeping bag. I bring a wool blanket and a pit bull, and I'm good to go. And so so I'm good that way. But that's one of the important things, obviously, when you're building these shelters and going back to that show alone, like you watch all these guys and what they bring. I'm always interested. And that was one thing that Survivor always did. They would be like, but they were like, what did you bring? A pot? What did you bring? A lighter? Okay, great. It was done. Like these guys are allowed to bring 10 items. I wish this show showed you a list of what they brought.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, because I would love to see it. I've gone to the website and there's 20 items total and you have to pick 10. So I've always wondered what they take. What is one of the skill what is one of the bushcraft skills that you're weakest in, Michelle?
Tracking and trapping, I would say, because I mean, if I don't have a firearm to take an animal out, I think it's tracking an animal and being able to trap animals for food sources. I think that's something I just honestly don't have enough experience in general. Even hunting, I don't have a ton of experience in, so it's something I need to learn and brush up on a lot more. They have the means to now. I should be on it, but
Well, that's that's one of the cool things that the crew out in Oklahoma does. Oklahoma is very, very active, and they get together. They do their meet and greets and they do their topics and all that, and they do range days. But one of the things they did as a meet and greet is they did basically rabbit processing. So they
Yeah, that's
went
cool.
out and had rabbits, and they cut them up and they processed them, and maybe
I
some
love
of them
that.
made chili or
Yeah.
rabbit chili or whatnot. But
Yeah.
I think that is definitely a skill that I know that I'm lacking in that one as well. Well,
Mhm.
how are you with comms? That's one of the ones that,
Pretty good.
yeah.
So I'm not a ham radio operator, but my husband is. So I've
Okay,
listened to him for the
perfect.
last over
Okay,
lots of years.
sure.
So he
Okay,
has all the equipment, he has all
okay,
the and he taught me also, like, I mean, he can teach me so much.
yeah,
So when we go like out and on, like we'll do random wilderness in the middle of nowhere, drop our stuff, like park our car and go.
yeah,
And we learned comms based off of that. So he'll go one direction, I'll go the other, and then we try to navigate back to the same points with comms and different land nav skills.
sure.
So he's
Not a
taught me a
huge one.
lot through that,
Okay,
but also
good.
just obviously being a ham radio operator,
Yeah,
he's always constantly trying to communicate with people in other countries and stuff. So I listen to
okay,
that and how he's
yeah.
tuning and dialing. So
Yeah. You should let them
yeah,
know that they have ZERT check-ins all
I
the
have.
time. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, it's
I
I
have.
know that they're not doing the ham radio as much when they do those check-ins.
Mhm,
They're doing Zello, which,
mhm,
is a form of cheating, I guess. But when
mhm,
I had Larry on, who is one of our POCs, who is like, I send everybody to him when they have questions about comms, because
mhm.
he is the resident
The
expert.
guru.
Yeah, he
Mhm,
is, and understanding, and Daniel's big on comms as well.
mhm.
But it's one
Yeah,
thing to have a ham radio, but if you don't have access to those repeaters, you're only
right,
going so far, but
right.
that's another thing that I am slacking on. And it is one thing I
Mhm,
know that Jamie said that he wants to really kind of get better with that this year. And I
right.
think that's important. Um so that's one thing that you're kind of lacking. I guess what do you think your strongest suit is when it comes to bushcraft? Or
Again, I think it goes back to like the situational awareness and identifying terrain, identifying places and things around me that I can use to my benefit. I think that's
yeah,
honestly my biggest strength is really just like saying, okay, what's around me, quickly
sure.
identifying and utilizing what I have around me, and also planning, because I think that's big thing that people overlook
Oh
is
yeah.
you get into a situation, you start panicking, you're in a stressful environment, you start forgetting about the things that are important. And what I take a minute, I was like, okay, let's see what's around me, what's going on, what do I need to do, setting up security, setting up shelter, setting up ways
Yeah.
to survive. So
Yeah. Now, are you pretty knowledgeable when it comes to vegetation and in your surrounding area? I know that that's something that's a giant challenge, because,
woohoo.
yeah, great. You're knowledgeable in your area, but if you've got to leave that area,
Yeah.
how up to speed are you on all
So
that stuff?
I know the basics. I know enough to
Yeah.
get me in trouble, but also enough to get
Right.
me to be safe enough, like, because honestly, like the things that I'm more concerned about is obviously what is edible and what is poisonous or
Right.
could cause me problems. So those two things are what I'm going to try to identify first and foremost. And I feel like I've taken quite a few classes. I could always brush up on that more. I mean, there's constantly things coming out on it.
Oh yeah.
Like I said, I do the Georgia Bushcraft events. They have awesome classes. There's thousands of classes out there that you could take.
Yeah.
There's many companies that are supportive of that too, that give you tools that you could utilize that are like pocket guides and so on. So
Yeah.
I would say I'm not overly proficient
Yeah.
in it, but I feel like
Yeah.
I'm comfortable enough to survive for a little bit.
Listen, that's one thing that a lot of people I think have to come to terms with, right? Is everyone sits
Mhm.
here and thinks that they're dialed in, they're good. You hear it a lot when it comes to firearms, right? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
as a firearms instructor, no, I've taken a
Yes.
class. I don't need to take another one. No, I know how to build a fire. I don't need to. No, you're not. Like, you are not as prepared as you think. And that was one
Right.
thing I know that that movie Homestead left me walking out
Mhm.
with. I was like, oof, like, I mean, okay, I don't have a set of radios or like a group of people
Mm.
around here that if something goes this way, okay, this person, where are we meeting? What is the plan?
Right.
Right. Like
Yeah.
I've got a plan with a select few, but again, my plan starts with you staying where you're at. I'm going to get to
Yep.
you. And
And
then
then
there
we'll go
needs
from
to be right. And then we'll go from there. But there needs to be a time in place. Like and you need to communicate that plan back and forth with the people in there. And there's you create the plan, you execute the plan, you expect the plan to go off the rails, you throw away the plan. Like
right.
those are real things right there, because shit can go sideways real quick if your plan starts with you getting in your vehicle and traveling to a spot and the road is blocked 100 yards down the down the street. So
and the people relying on you are now panicking, not sure, should I stay, should I leave? I mean, those communications or finding ways, or at least having a plan in place. Right. You have that established. So
and so that's one thing I want to do, is get some handheld radios that can that can communicate back and forth. Where are you at when it comes to medical?
Yeah, so I have had quite a few medical trainings, blowout trainings, especially being in the firearms world, I have to learn quite a bit of that. I don't think that, again, if it boils down to an infected wound that you're trying to survive off of, it's going to take, and you don't have all, the medicine and everything that one needs, it's going to, I still need to brush up on like what plans would work for, the various situations. But I feel like I'm pretty confident if something were to happen that I could at least get somebody stable enough to seek attention or seek help from elsewhere.
But good. One of the other things that it is definitely a survival skill. And there was a person that I wanted to have on the show, because she was an angler, if you will. And one thing I'm just, I fished when I was a kid, but I am not a fisherman. And I guess the real big problem with that is it is a very good way to source food should you need to, and you're near a water source. Like that's one thing. Like if you watch that show Alone, they're always near a water source and they're always trying to catch fish. Whether it's building a gill net. I mean, you watch these guys, they bring paracord and they start peeling apart the paracord and they start making a gill net and they lay that out there, and it's a passive way of trying to gather food. It's one thing that you brought about, trapping and
exactly.
And tracking and trapping, watching these people trap squirrels or rabbits and whatnot. And hey, like I like animals more than I like people. But I also understand that animals are a source of food when it comes down to this kind of situation. So it's important.
Definitely.
And so you're obviously you're on your path here. You're doing this. You got involved with ZERT, and we love having you as part of ZERT. And I'd love to see Georgia get just as exciting and as busy as Oklahoma, and getting some more awesome members down there and getting out there. I mean, you guys are rolling into your swamp time of the year where it's just 175,000 degrees out there, and who the hell wants to do anything? Yeah, who wants to do that crap? But but
you have to learn how to live in it.
Well, you do. I mean, listen, I've always said that it's easier to get warm, right? Like you can layer up with clothing and get warm. You cannot get naked and get cool. Like it doesn't matter. Like, and down in that swamp hole down there with all those, you got those crazy, child carrying bugs, the bugs that are so big that take kids away. Like
they're huge.
I am all set with that place. George has always been like, when you started talking about some of that stuff, it's just so strange to me down there, right? Because you don't have mountains, you don't have like your elevation, and your wilderness is much, much different than something like I've got up here, or that you had out in Colorado. It's a completely different situation. So you've had to kind of adapt, but that's the best part about being a prepared individual and a survivalist is the adapting and the overcoming. So
exactly.
I love seeing it. I love seeing it.
Thanks.
But we normally keep this show around an hour, and we
Yeah.
don't want to stretch it too long for people that
Yeah,
are listening. But we do appreciate you for coming on. We appreciate all of you out there
definitely.
listening. As you guys know, we publish our shows every Thursday on Apple and on Spotify. And that's through the Firearms Radio Network. And then we post the video portion of this on YouTube. So if you're not following over on YouTube, head over to the ZERT Coffee and Chaos channel, and you can like and subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified when we drop shows like this one and like others. And then head over to the regular ZERT channel, and you can catch videos like we just dropped about the discount that you get to Rad Palm for party shirts, or the mess that SIG has created for themselves. But that's for a whole nother day. But Michelle, as always, thank you for
Thank you.
spending some time with me tonight. And we always like to end it with any final thoughts for you.
Yeah, no, I just, stay prepared, guys, and appreciate you having me on, and always stay trained up. Be out there and constantly looking for opportunities to hone in on your skills. But thank you so
Awesome.
much, Chris, for having me.
Yeah, great. All right, guys, listen, you stay safe, stay prepared, and we'll see you soon. ZP002 out.
Thanks, Chris.
All right.